just doing another video. Um, I kind of forgot what I was gonna talk about, um, but it was supposed to be from you, one of the first videos that I uploaded, and um, it was something I left out. I mean, almost deliberately because I was gonna save it for later, for something more subscription service based. Another way of putting it is that I was gonna write a book and just put it in there. So I started talking about it, because reading is a certain activity. Like reading a book, I'm not gonna post a PDF or an online file to read, but on a screen where the experience will be entirely different. But um, talking about it is different. So I want to reserve the right to read a book for that very special occasion. Of course. Oops. So yeah. Well, yeah. Um, that's one aspect of it. Actually, something that I was supposed to talk about is sorry, let me think for a second. A number of different things. I'm gonna start with one topic and then move on to the next, and really only gonna cover a couple things in this video, and we'll just continue the rest in the next video. But also, most, if not all, of what I talk about here will be in my manuscripts. My latest manuscript. For instance, um, what is it? Let me see. There's one thing. I know what to talk about. So to start, um, there's like something about salvia or something. You know, where it's just pretty weird. Um, um, you know, some of my experiences with it, smoking it, kind of shift the dimensional view of reality as it is so that you kind of physically see everything become one. Um, Total boundary dissolution there. You lose your depth perception, so everything like you see everything kind of slide into like one object, and the different colors of each object are what define the borders. So like say behind me you could see like a red and white and black flannel, and then after that is the white wall, which it's in front of, and then my hoodie, my hair, me, this part of the hoodie, white wall, blue couch. Like if you smoked salvia and were looking at that, you would see everything like shift and like flatten back out. And then you would just see kind of the colors. And if you could remember, like if you're there for enough time and um, your consciousness kind of starts to come back, you'll remember what you're looking at, and then you'll say, "Oh, that's that." Like, "Oh, that's the wall. It looks different, but I can see that." Like you'll just see it. It'll look like a band. Like you'll see like red, and then you'll see like white, and then you'll see like more red or different shade of it, like burgundy. Then you'll see black for my hair. Then you'll see brown, and then you'll see black, and then you'll see that. Then you'll see like another white section. And it'll look like a fence or something. But you know, um, there could be entities there too, and it looks very Mexican. Um, DMT also looks Mexican sometimes when you do it. Like similar to mushrooms and whatnot, cannabis, LSD, LSA, peyote, ayahuasca, which is just DMT with harmalines. So one thing psychedelics do, such as DMT, is put you in contact with aliens or fairies or aliens. Normally especially if you come from that faith and tradition, you could, sort of just have a grasp on it. But with some of the psychedelic drugs, it makes you see it. So it highlights that aspect of it. Uh, like you'll see what you're doing, I guess. Kind of could give a new definition of this or that, like you could have like a sun god or something, and someone will say that, like, oh, that represents that, or that's a sign of that. That's what they really meant. So you have like elves and fairies, which don't really exist to traditional science or reality. So it's kind of just another way of looking at stuff. You just say the fairy forces are here or there. Some stuff could be mediated through actions people make. So, um, with DMT, you'll see it. It won't just be like venerating it. It'll be like the time to actually do it. Like everything else is kind of either veneration or preparation for it. But when you actually do it, like that's it. Like that's the thing. Like you'll see it, you'll experience it, you'll be it, you'll live it. You know, when you're not doing that, it's mostly veneration for it or extra preparation. Call it studying for an exam and all that. You could look at it that way. So to connect that, people could just say like, "Oh, you're bullshit, and you're making this up. You're making that up." Uh, but what I'm actually doing is relying on our texts, such, such as the Bible or Shakespeare, for modern stuff. There's a bunch of psychedelic literature, not just from the 60s, but from before. There's some stuff from the 19th century. King Arthur stuff goes back to, you know, the 5th century. You have ancient Greece stuff from like 800 BC or whatever, and all that. There's some books of the Bible are from 40 and 50 AD, so those are what the references are. They talk about it then. I know people are going to say, like, oh, people were dumb back then. They didn't know what they're talking about. They didn't have science or technology, so they believed in spirits and whatnot. I don't think the advent of technology erased that worldview. I think, just updated our understanding of it. I think you could have technology with fairy. When you smoke DMT or do mushrooms, like that's what you could see. Terrence McKenna called them machine elves. I've had those kind of trips too with DMT and mushrooms. So it's like technology mixed with fairy. I mean, the elves and machines. So you'll have like spaceships and UFOs. You have aliens and elves and fairies. Um, the aliens humans are basically like elves or fairies. uh, that's where the changelings come from. So um, so Shakespeare also has some faith in there. You could read Sherlock Holmes and he quotes the Bible every now and then. He quotes French stuff. He quotes Shakespeare. Um, Shakespeare wrote about some fairies. I'm not saying he was like a flower child and only believed in that. He had a political side. Um, so one thing Shakespeare did in A Midsummer Night's Dream is he included the four fairy. I think I talked about this already, but he included the four fairy forces in there as characters. So you have Robin, Goodfellow, and Puck, and the forces are Moss, Peasbottom, Mustard Seed. Sorry, Moth, Peasbottom, Mustard Seed, and yeah, Puck. No, Cobweb. On that Moth, Peasbottom. Peas Blossom, Cobweb, and Mustard Seed. So, I wasn't lectured on him or anything like that. It's like my own personal research that I did and that I was doing and that I'll do even more still, in progress. Um, so to me, I just interpreted it using what tools I had. I don't think that's Shakespeare's best story or play. So, in trying to relate this all to fairy, you could keep a number of things in mind. I'm also doing this video to sort of correct some stuff I made. Like, if you've read my Twitter, you'll see stuff I say on there. Really, some of it's not even really accurate. Most of it's true. I do, like, when I talk about my psychedelic experiences and whatnot. It all happened. It's all true. I'm not lying or embellishing that. But other stuff, I is kind of gauge responses. For example, the other day I said I have yet to try an edible dose large enough to experience psychedelic effects off it. I've experienced psychedelic effects from different doses of weed, smoking it. So to talk about that, I have actually had psychedelic experiences from high enough doses of edibles a few times. I just didn't mention that in that tweet I made, and I didn't feel like making another tweet about it. So I'm just talking about it here. Plus, it's gonna be in the book I'm writing. Um, I'll throw some stuff about edibles in there. I just I was just tired and I just didn't feel like making another tweet about that. So hopefully that covers it. I don't, you don't win anything if you've had psychedelic edible experiences. I did it to make a point because when I talk about DMT, no one seems impressed. You can talk about mushrooms and acid or salvia, ayahuasca, peyote, MDMA. No one seems impressed, but people have access to edibles. They just go to the store or the dispensary and get edibles, and think they're God or they experience God or something. But so some of the stuff I do is just trying to dumb it down. It's like when I talked about DMT, I didn't get the response that I was expecting or that I wanted. And, so it's like, how can I relate to these people? Maybe they have they don't know what DMT is. Maybe they have more experience with edibles. So I'll just talk about that instead to see if I could relate to them on that level or something. Like even if you talk about mushrooms, they don't have a lot of experience with that, so you can't really talk about it. Like some stuff shouldn't really be shared. Some stuff could be too sacred, or whatever, even to certain people. Like I kind of wanted to find like some sage or arc sage or someone I could like talk to about stuff like that, but you really can't. I tried to think about that beforehand. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do DMT, and then maybe have someone to talk about, or I'll just talk about it. Someone, I was kind of keeping it more of a secret than anything else for a long time, but it was like eating at me from the inside or whatever, and it didn't make that much sense anymore. So I tried to talk about it, but you can't. I mean, it's like mushrooms. I didn't really want to talk about mushrooms that much because if you do, especially to random people or strangers, that gives them an idea. Like you put that idea in their head, and then they want to try mushrooms. On one level, I don't condone that to other people that I don't know. I mean, you could say through like cause and effect or a chain reaction that the more people that try mushrooms, it could like lead to like world peace faster or something like that, or change. Like when people presume change is good or whatever. So whether it's something people really want or not. So it's kind of a catch-22 or something, or like a paradox. Um, So in a Midsummer Night's Dream, it's mainly just Cupid type stuff where uh, people are getting shot with arrows or drinking potions. You know, so I find fairy to be a kind of a unique thing, I guess. Um, Going off of Terence McKenna, butterflies are important to it. I guess it has to do with nature and stuff. Um, um, so, that's kind of what moth is as a fairy force, I think. Because some moths look like butterflies, so you could be fooled. You know, when people think of fairy, they some might have a tendency to only think of like positive things or like good stuff. Um, Not unless you're trained would you like really that easily distinguish a moth from a butterfly in terms of beauty or symbols of beauty or pretty things. Um, Moths could be worse in that they eat holes through your clothes sometimes. Um, so one important aspect is being able to delineate between good and bad fairies, or something good that can happen, something bad that could happen. There are a bunch of different kinds. Um, you just have to know how to recognize them or what you're seeing or looking at. One thing, and I may not have like all the details down in this example or anything like that, but some fairy, it's kind of like leaving cookies and milk out for Santa Claus. Like your mom will bake cookies like on Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas Eve and like leave them out overnight with milk. Similarly, in some of our most authentic records and written texts that are probably from oral tradition, and that's another reason for all the King Arthur stuff is because there's some fairy stuff in there too. Them being some of our oldest written works in English and French, based off Welsh, Celtic stuff too. Whatever, the Germans retold some of it. So that's one reason for that. Uh, and in there, it usually just has the effect of like magic or whatever. So, not just that, but you know, peas blossom. I kind of just took it to mean blossom related things. The only thing I did with it for like gardens is have some certain knowledge of you know certain there certain things or whatever, um, however necessary or appropriate this was. I need a shave, I think. So, for example, there's the example of some plants having more or less connection with fairy. There are certain ones, um, you know, take like a rowan twig and place it near your house, and it's supposed to ward off bad spirits and whatnot. Take mistletoe, and if two people stand underneath it, they're supposed to kiss and all of that. So, one plant, uh, like if it's not shown respect, the fairies sabotage it. You'll see that, it'll say like the plants won't grow. So that's taken to mean like the fairies got mad and destroyed it. Uh, Similarly, if it's shown respect, it'll grow pretty well. So, I mean, we know that there aren't like invisible forces mediating that per se. That our understanding is through science, in this case biology and ecology, in the environment. We know about nitrogen fixation and how that can make soil more potent. So, that's just kind of that. Like, either way, if you're doing that, you will be sort of venerating that concept anyway. Um, Gardening and farming can be hard work. It's pretty full time stuff. It's not a game unless you treat it as one. It's not an intellectual exercise or anything. It's mostly hands-on practicality, hands-on work. You learn by doing. If you want to teach someone how to do it, you can. So, like, the more hands-on experience you have there, the more you'll understand the theory and applications anyway about it. So, that's important. Then similarly, you have mustard seed as the other one. I know it wasn't too long ago where we harnessed the power of artificial selection in the lab. I do know that a lot of the staple crops we have today were genetically engineered from mustard, the mustard plant. Excuse me. So, a lot of different vegetables, such as like spinach and whatnot, different greens came from the mustard plant. That's something that we did. I don't think they were doing that back then in Shakespeare's day. So, I take it to mean that Shakespeare used some foresight there to predict the power of that, of mustard seed, and just genetic engineering. Um, so as a fairy force, that's kind of just saying mustard is important. You could use, like mustard gas. Like, not that you could use it, but um, like you could use mustard to think about anything that you want, really. Uh, Mustard gas is important as a warfare item, so I'm guessing that's in there too, for whatever reason. Um, you typically want to use things for good, not for harm or anything, but that can do that. And then cobweb, that's the last one. Everyone knows cobwebs are like old spider webs that the spider abandoned, dust. So, and obviously with Spider-Man as one of our more modern um, figures, myth, archetypes, as a superhero, I think that works in their comic books when compared to literature are only extensions of it, completely different mediums, completely different things, but I think you could use both of them for one reason or the other. Most comics are mostly, just criticism on books. So a lot of them just try to make fun of literature and, books that don't have pictures in them. I think there are pros and cons to both. So, to tie Spider-Man into fairy may be seen as sacrilegious to some, but it's really only done through its connection to the name Marvel, which, when I say or read, sometimes makes me think of elves, like elven, like Marvel, elf sound kind of similar. So, it makes me think of like Lord of the Rings and everything else. So, I mean, I know there was a thing like, uh, for instance, Terence McKenna implied that you shouldn't read comic books and only read books. Um, he said one thing to do is to not read a book if it isn't over 100 years old. There have been some like paintings since the biblical days. Some of them have been collected in a book, so it's not too much of a stretch to say that certain like illustrated manuals or pamphlets existed then. I don't hesitate to call those comic books too much, but there were illustrations